What is a king tide and why does this phenomenon happen? We have the answers here on In the Know. Well, we do have some coastal flooding advisories in place across the west coast. We've already seen those water level rising just yesterday across parts of BC. You can see just how high that water is. Well, that's all due to the heavy rain we've also seen across the west, which is ongoing. Yesterday, we already saw some heavy showers. Ryan sent this in out of Port Renfrew. More showers ongoing today and even through the rest of the week. But the question is, how is the king tide affecting those coasts? Well, in fact, it all has to do with something to do with the moon. This was the wolf moon spotted just last night. It is coinciding even with a supermoon. Very interesting how this plays a key role in these king tides. Meteorologist Nadine Powell joins us to talk more about this. Nadine, I wasn't able to get a glimpse of the moon myself. It was a little bit too cloudy, but it's really interesting how it can play a role in these rare but almost annually occurrences of the king tides.
Yeah, well, typically we see the diurnal cycles of regular tides, high tide, low tide. But with king tides, these are exceptionally high tide levels. Like you mentioned, has some relation to the full moon, not just the full moon, but the new moon too. We'll show that in just a bit. But affecting British Columbia forest coastal areas on our Sunday, we can see some of the times of the when we are expecting those tides to be really high for us for this morning and into the afternoon. Vancouver Island through Juan de Fuca and the Strait of Georgia. Now, the king tides for us, this essentially is an extremely high tide. It occurs about twice a year. But how does the moon come in? Well, essentially, this occurs when we've got a new moon or a full moon. And we have the wolf moon there, which is a full moon. And when we get the alignment of the earth, moon, and the sun for us, and the moon is close to the earth, we get that extra gravitational pull, and that causes sea levels to rise. And certainly we have been seeing recently, not only in BC, but into California as well. We see here, take a look at in San Diego, some of the waves just crashing on shore there. So this can be the downside of it when we get those king tides higher than normal tides. And when we do get some strong winds, that can really exacerbate the impacts in terms of coastal erosion and coastal flooding. And we are looking at essentially for us this weekend too, some strong winds coming down through Juan de Fuca and into the Strait of Georgia. So coastal areas likely to see that impact for us for today. Now, Victoria, I don't know if you remember last week we had a powerful low that ripped across the Great Lakes. With that too had impacts to water levels. And we're seeing here Lake Erie, Port Stanley, very, very high waves for us. And we had something last week, what we call a seiche. This essentially is when we see the water being pushed from one end of the lake to the other end of the lake. And we get the lake floor being exposed on the western side of Lake Erie, which is what we had last week. And then we had all of that water being pushed off toward the eastern side of the lake. So, many folks in Michigan, for instance, they were able to walk out on the shores or onto the lake bed of Lake Erie. Meanwhile, like the video we saw there, Victoria, very, very high waves and water levels crashing onto the eastern side of Lake Erie, Victoria.
Quite an interesting phenomenon. How could I forget that storm last week? It brought such impacts. But thank you so much, Nadine, for diving into some of these interesting and even rare weather phenomenons.